Welcome to Marathon Champions, the podcast where running legends Benji Durden, Bill Rogers, and Ron Tabb share their timeless wisdom on marathon training and inspire listeners with their wealth of experience. These champions continue to impact the running world today.
You know, we've all kind of watched the high school scene, the collegiate scene, we still stay pretty aware of what's happening. And it's so funny because Colin, a lot of times, somebody will do something like, oh my gosh, can't wait to see what they do. And I'm always the skeptic that goes, yeah, but what kind of training were they doing to do that? Like, what do they have left? You're in high school and you need to step it up to another level when you hit that collegiate level, and then step it up to another level when you hit that elite level. If you're already training like an elite runner in high school, how do you what's left to give? So when I know of a runner, like if I know somebody's training with you, Ron, and probably the kind of training they're doing, and maybe they don't have the fastest time in high school in the US, but they're legit, those are the ones I like to watch, because it's like, okay, wait a minute. I know they have something left to give. And I remember when Steve Scott was coaching down at San Marcos, he was very aware of that when in recruiting or when students would show interest in coming to school there. And he would say, I'd rather have a 9:30 2-miler that's undertrained than an 8:52 miler that's shot the watery. And there were some schools, like Great Oak, and at the time like Marietta Valley, that college coaches were skeptical about recruiting, because it's like, I don't know what do they have left to give, and am I willing to risk a scholarship or whatever to bring them on? So
yeah. One of the things when I was in college back in Missouri, I used to watch a lot of California athletes. And you mentioned that's where your son was going to school. They were doing 16-mile runs on the weekends. And one of my observations was seeing athletes being overtrained in high school, and then never, after high school, then they would never see that particular, like Ralph Turner, for example. He's a 8:45, so you would have expected Ralph to go on, and he had a wonderful career, but you look at what he did in high school, and Eric Holst was another one of our time during our time. They trained so much in high school, put so many miles in. Where do you go after?
Right. Well, and you have to remember, and I can remember we had this talk with our son. He went to UC Santa Barbara, and he was not offered a scholarship or anything, which we were actually fine with, because he had financial need and he also had academic scholarship. But I kind of liked the idea that he wasn't depending on performing to justify the scholarship, and that he could go to school, he could run, and not necessarily always have to live up to. So when he went to Santa Barbara, and one of the reasons he chose Santa Barbara over Mark Conover and San Luis Obispo was San Luis Obispo had a lot of older runners, like upperclassmen runners, and Santa Barbara had a lot of like freshmen, sophomores. They had this young team that in his mind was going to grow together. And so he went to their time trial as a walk-on and made the team, which we were thrilled about, on his 18th birthday, I think it was, if I remember right. But anyway, he made the team, and he was crowing about these teammates. There's this guy and this guy and this guy, and they did this in high school, and they did this and this. And Tom was like, who cares, Michael? He goes, by your senior year, most of them won't even be running anymore. Goes, no, this is this phenomenal group of people. And he goes, no, he goes, I'll bet of the freshmen that ran that time trial, half of them won't even be running their sophomore year. And by their senior year, probably only a couple. And he was right. And he, because you realize you have, when you have a high level high school recruit, and I look at this like, Great Oak, where I work, you have these people that just did phenomenal things in high school, but they are the center of their program. Like, things are designed around them. They're the best. They've always been the best. They're the stars. And you go to college, and for the first time in your life, you're just another guy.
Yeah.
You're just another one. And you've never been that in your life, where you've been the number two, the number three, the one trying to prove themselves. And, pretty much, by Michael's third year at Santa Barbara or whatever, those freshmen that he made the team with, they weren't around anymore. So depending on what you want, some of these kids with phenomenal high school times, I can think of a couple from Great Oak that got a free college education out of it. Didn't make it as a runner, but they now have a degree from a respectable college because of what they did. So it's not all
It
bad,
wasn't a
but
total loss for them to do
no.
that.
But this idea, I remember one girl in particular that ran it at Great Oak, and the people at school, oh, she's going to make the next Olympic team. I'm like, no, she's not.
Yeah, I mean, it's
You
really
know?
hard to forecast from high school performances. I mean, I when I went to the University of Georgia as a walk-on, they had recruited the state champion in the mile.
Hmm.
And I didn't get to run the state meet my senior year because of an injury. That kid never beat me in college.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
never.
you guys have talked to Tom. I mean, Tom ran 9:34 in high school, which was, the state record in Nevada, but that wouldn't make the CIF finals in California.
Yeah.
But in college and beyond, none of those people beat him.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, what do you have left to give, and how hungry are you, I guess.
Part of me over the years came up with this theory that you had a 7-year lifetime of excellence.
Hmm.
And it depended on when you had that seven. It's probably not completely true, but I looked at people over the years. And if you have 4 really good years in high school, you've used up part of those 7 years.
Well, and I think also it's not how do you do when everything's going well, it's how do you rebound when it's not.
Yeah, there is that
And
too.
I think again in the length of my career, I I retired several times. Well, maybe not retired, but like I was done several times. The first being when I really hurt my knee in 81. I was done. And then again after 88, after I made that trip to South Africa, like you're 31 years old, it's over. But I would have these times where I would be away from it for a year, couple of years, several years. And so you're running, you haven't really lost the strength and stuff, but you get to like heal everything up and start over again as the underdog, not the guy in the top of the heap. And so, in 88, I thought I was done, came back in 92, and it didn't go that well, retired again, and then in 95 came back again. So it's, what is your expectation, and how do you rebound from when it's not going well? Do you get up and try again, or do you move on to something else? And I see a lot of runners, like I said, the answer might be to move to a different city, move to a different coach, move up in distance. You just start grasping at something else because this isn't working anymore. Well, just because it's not working at this moment doesn't mean it's not working anymore. And you just keep trying.
Do you know your best 800 split in that 1500? I mean, I would think maybe there was a sub two in that.
Well, the last 400 was, oh gosh, I have it written down somewhere. Last 400 was like 58, 57, 58, and the last 300 was 43.
Yeah, so you had having never broken two, you ran really close to breaking two during that 1500.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think mostly it was pretty steady, and then like we were like kind of 65, 65, 66 or something like that, and then off you go. I think it was, I forgot what the actual last 400 was. I know it was 43 and it was 29 something for the last 200. So it was all in that last 400. And then and the thing that helped me then too was, I learned something because I always, I didn't mean to, but I always controlled the races from the front. And that isn't, especially when you're running a little longer, that's not the best strategy all the time. And so the thing I did pick up from there was, because you did that on the last lap, you can, if you're there with 400 to go, you can run with anybody. And as it ended up, the Olympics didn't go as well as I would have liked, but I think I tried too hard. I think I worked too hard between the trials and the Olympics themselves. And again, the Olympics were a bit of an unfamiliar circumstance because, having not really thought I'd make the team, a lot of these people had hotel rooms and places to go. Well, I was running for Brooks. The other shoe companies had hospitality houses. A lot, the Carl Lewis's, the Marys, the Ethel and Ashfords, they were staying in hotels. We were sleeping in the dorms and, eating in the cafeteria and walking. I ended up, Tom and I, our housing at the Olympics, it was interesting. It was sort of the married student housing, and it was like an apartment building, and there were these 2-bedroom units. So there was a little living room and kitchen, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and 8 of us shared that. So there were 4 in each bedroom, 2 bunk beds. And these rooms were small enough that, like, if you had a suitcase, you had to put it on one of the bunks to open it up because there wasn't even enough room for that. So that was interesting. And then Tom and I, because of the last minute making the team, the option of finding housing, like if I'd been with a different shoe company, I could have stayed at a hospitality house or something. But Brooks had a hospitality house in Hermosa Beach, so that wasn't going to work. And so we started looking for a place to stay where we could stay together. And we we rented a room in a fraternity house that was the hospitality house for Skoal chewing tobacco. And we paid $45 a night for our room. And the guys there were great. They protected me. They tried to protect me. And when I was sleeping, they'd keep everybody away. When I was going to shower, everybody out of here, that kind of thing. But I was walking back to USC to go back onto the, athletes' quarters to eat. And so, in hindsight, obviously I was walking way too much. And now I think the thought that not only did you make the team, you kind of outside shot at a medal. And I think I just tried too hard. I just wasn't myself. I did make the finals of both races, which was a feather in my cap, I guess. But then when the games were over, we had just a little break and then went to Europe. And in Europe, I beat everybody that beat me in the games. And I PR'd in the mile, I PR'd in the 800, coming second to Krakachvilova in Paris. So, the highlight of my summer came a little too late, but was still running well, into September. So it again kind of solidified the thought that I can run with anybody, which was a good
Did you
lesson to
probably
learn.
back off a little bit after the games?
Yes, we actually, after the games, obviously you're getting ready to travel. We did back off a little bit between the trials and the games. Took a few days to just kind of, and going to Europe. I think I ran 8 races in 2 weeks that I was there.
And so you didn't really train much in between, really.
No.
So that's probably part of why you were racing better. Your body was getting more
Yes.
rest.
Yes. now you're just resting, and it was funny because I had Tom and Tom. I had Tom, who was, still coming off this injury, and Tom Sturak, who I was his only athlete. And um, I probably could have made more money over there if I didn't bring Tom along, but that was out of the question to not include him. But the meet directors were really good about, letting Tom be there. And so it was familiar, it was comfortable. I didn't have to worry about who my roommate's going to be. And each year at the best meets, so you have great opportunity. But as we got on the plane to go, because I'd never been to Europe, and they were both talking to me about, hey, just lower your expectations. I know it sounds glamorous, but it isn't really. You're going to stay in some dumpy hotels and you're going to eat some crappy food and you're not going to be able to sleep, and just, be prepared and enjoy the experience. And so we got on the plane, and I think I slept the entire flight, which I got off the plane. They're like, how did you do that? And my very first European race was Zurich. And we got there, and it was, an amazing hotel, fabulous food. And they're both saying, it's not always going to be like this. It's not always going to be like this. But it kind of was, for the most part. And so, yeah, we just on a roll by then.
So, well, let's end up with a little bit of you had some road racing in your life.
Yeah.
So what are the highlights of your road racing life?
I did run some road races, and I did get to run, I wasn't a factor, but I did go with Tom to Bloomsday, ran Bloomsday, which was hard. Did
Yes.
Cherry Blossom 10 mile.
Yes.
Some things like that but I think at that point, I think my 10K PR was 34 something. And so toward the end, like in 96, going into 96, I really felt like I could make the team. I was 38, and the training was going really well, and I hurt my hip. It's like a hip flexor thing. And so just trying to nurse that and be healthy for the trials. So I made it to the trials, I made the final, but I just wasn't sharp. It was disappointing to say the least. And so after that was going to be the end, and I promised Tom, I'm done. I'm going to retire. No more. And I finished that final, and it was not pretty. And Vince came up to me after the race, and he goes, let's give it one more year. Don't go out like that. Give it one more year. And Tom, rolled his eyes and went, oh, great. There's going to be another year. So the next year, I did race on the track. I turned 40. I ran, I think, 203, 408, something like that. Anyway, was running pretty well, especially for being 40 years old. But I was mixing in these road races. And I remember I ran Carlsbad, and I ran Freihofer's, and Freihofer's was a huge highlight. I ran 16:0. I should have broke 16. I went out way too fast. I think 16:10, 16, whatever it was. And then got to do some of these races. I remember that summer I ran here in Newport Beach. They had the Bastille 8K, and I had just gotten back from Europe, and I ran 26:19, which I think is still the master's record, thankfully, because it's not a distance they run very often. But it was, I just thoroughly enjoyed kind of mixing up the track and the roads. And the beauty of 97 was most of my Europe racing was rabbiting, and I was Gabriella Szabo's rabbit of choice because I was good at it, I guess. I'm good at pacing myself. I think all those workouts where nobody was telling me what I was doing, I could run at even pace. So she would ask for me. I rabbited for Liz McColgan in a race. And I remember chuckling because you're going to these, big races, and right about the time it's going to hurt is when you get to step off the track. And you get paid more than you've ever gotten paid ever to do that. So it was a nice farewell tour. And so the next year, the determination was to just run the roads and this Masters circuit. And like I
That half
said,
marathon that you started with.
oh yeah, that was horrible. But I did run the half marathon. I ran Azalea Trail. I ran 33:22. That was my 10K PR. I ran in a not part of the circuit. I did run a 15:42 or something like that. It was sort of a downhill 5K, which made me feel good. But I ran Crim, the 10 mile.
Mhm.
I ran Tulsa. There was another race up in Northern California, a 10K. So it was fun, mixing it up. My times were not world class, but I was very
But you
happy
were in
with
your 40s.
PRing and like everything.
But you were in your 40s, so
Yeah,
world class would be less
as a
likely.
40, yeah. The interesting thing as a 40-year-old was I don't even remember the name. There was a Russian gal who was just tearing it up.
Who later
And
became, I think, retired because of drugs.
well, I do the one significant, well, yeah, okay. And she did come up at a time, obviously in the Russian system, she was a 350 whatever 1500 runner. And like I said, even if you're not doing the drugs anymore, the strength that you gain
Yeah.
from that time, it's sort of like a male becoming a female. You might be a female now, but you developed your body at
It doesn't completely go away, even if you
yeah,
take
yeah.
blockers.
And so, but anyway, uh I remember that I was just stunned because she would run like a 2:30 marathon and the next week run a
Yeah.
32-minute 10K. I'm like, you can't do that. Nobody could, that's not humanly possible. I don't know.
And it wasn't. And
Yeah.
like I say,
And I
I
heard
think,
that, again, it's rumor, who knows what. I heard that she had tested positive at the Houston Marathon, which she won.
yeah,
Yet she still competed the rest of that season and was invited back to the Houston Marathon the next year. So,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
How many times did you do the Fifth Avenue mile?
once.
Only
I did it
once.
once. Yeah. And I don't know
I
if
would have thought you would have been invited every year for that.
yeah, I don't know what way I ran it once. I have a picture of Wendy Sly and I at after the finish, which was fun. We both ran for Brooks. Still love that picture. But and the end of a long season. It wasn't my best race ever, but it was fun to again. That was one of those races where oh, good, I got to run the Fifth Avenue mile, and then I would run. I wasn't a great indoor runner, and um, I was never one to, there are people who, I think Steve Scott was one of them. He'd run the indoor season off just strength stuff and still run phenomenal times. I couldn't do that. I had to kind of race myself into shape and get sharp. And back then, of course, a lot of the indoor races were those 11 lap to the mile tracks, which
Right.
being very long legged wasn't the
Yeah,
easiest thing
Yeah.
to do. But so you'd hit a 200-meter track and go, oh, wow, this is cool. The indoor thing, it was tough to pass up because you made more money there. You couldn't not pass up the income. And of course, coming off of 84, there was that big, Mary coming back to prove herself and avenge her loss, which probably wasn't much of a challenge for her indoors to beat the tar out of me. But uh, I liked the payday. I didn't care for, having to go to the East Coast all the time and all that. But again, the indoor thing was fun, but it was not my favorite thing to do. I would have rather been able to go out and road race.
who was the guy that was in charge of Brooks at that time? Was it Dean Ranke? Was that
No, it was Will Albert. And we had kind of a joke because uh, somebody had said I was the first person to make an Olympic team in Brooks, but then found out no, in '80, who wore Brooks in '80? Was it Don Page? And there was somebody else, a distance runner. But anyway, needless to say,
you'd be the
Brooks was
first woman.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So, and Tom, what happened was Tom was working at Sub 4 and, managing whatever you call it, Sub 4 Track Club, and that phenomenal group of guys that were pretty much all personal friends of his on that team. And he was starting to look toward what am I going to do when I'm not racing anymore? And so he left Sub 4 to take a job at ASICS. And that was when we got married. He had gone to run these races and train in New Zealand and stayed at Dick Quacks's house with Centro Senior. I think there 7 weeks and trained and raced. And on his way back, stopped in Hawaii because his sister lived there. And I met him over there so we could have a vacation. We got married. But he was going to, a couple weeks later, be starting his job at ASICS. But anyway, when he came back, the thought was there would be a career at ASICS, and that transition from racing to business person and a career, a living. And so when he got there, they weren't really giving him the opportunity to train very well. And working for the Japanese was not necessarily a pleasant thing at that time. And he would have to go to all these trade shows and travel, and so he was there about 9 months and realized, I think this, or where I am, and talked to at the trade shows, all the guys from different companies talk to each other, same people, but the next trade show they might be working for a different shoe company. How that goes. And he got to talking to Will Albers, and they gave him the opportunity to run for Brooks. I think his contract was $14,000. But he was able to quit that job, and he was just at home training and making money racing, managing to get. And the thought there was that he would then have a career with Brooks. And he was trying to groom himself as either a tech rep or doing something and having a career with Brooks. So because of that, because they were sponsoring him, they let me have free shoes and a jersey. And so we stayed there, and I had it. So anyway, long story short, after the 800, I made the team. Tom was sitting with Will Albers, and he was like, "Hey, we got a contract here." Yep, we do. So then after the 1500, he looked at Tom and said, "What do you want?" And then somebody from Nike, I forgot who it was, somebody came up to Tom after the 1500 and said, "We need to talk." And Tom looked at him and said, "No. First of all, I don't know if you can afford her. And second of all, I don't think Mary would ever allow for, her to be Nike." And whoever it was, I forgot who it was, said, "Yeah, you're right." But the interesting thing with Brooks was Brooks had primarily road racers. Greg Meyer was their premier guy at the time. And so their contracts were all geared toward road racing and marathons and all that. And so Tom was able to kind of design my contract to our benefit, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. I mean,
and so there was a base pay, and you could up to double that with bonuses, which pretty much wasn't hard to do. So I had a contract then that went through the end of '88. And in '88, I made that trip to South Africa, which is a whole other story. And what had happened was when I made the team, the people at Brooks were so happy. They said, "We'll take care of you for life." Like they were that excited. And so my joke was that I died at the end of 1988 because my life must have ended because the relationship ended. Um, but it was good. It was good for us at the time.
Well, I think we should probably let you get on with life. It's been really a pleasure to
Yeah.
talk with you. And,
Oh, you too. Like I said, I'm a marathon legend now.
well, you at least have hung out with us.
I did, which is always fun.
Well, I will let you get on with life, but it has really
Thank
been a
you.
pleasure. And
You too. Always love chatting with you guys.